It is Seniors for Social Action Ontario's pleasure to introduce you to David McAULEY, a visionary architect who designed, developed, and lives in watershed co-housing in Guelph. David is an expert on this subject and is an innovator well-versed in other seniors housing options as well. There's no one better to present this session today, so please welcome everyone, David.
Thank you, Trish, and welcome everybody. And I'm looking forward to presenting to you for a little bit, and then we'll open it up for questions. So there's a fair number of slides to show, a lot of visuals, and I just want to go through kind of the agenda for what we're looking at here, and starting with some background in terms of my experience, especially with my parents, and then working into the needs, wishes, wants, and priorities for many seniors. Just find some commonalities with that. And then look at the resources. This would be the resources of the people that we have, and any other accoutrements they have, properties, whatever. We'll look at housing and seniors just in a general sense in terms of what the general needs are. And we'll look at traditional options, which I'm sure you're familiar with. Most people would be living in some of these options. And then the other ones we'll look at and spend a lot of time on the innovative choices. And I'm going to spend most of the time on the co-housing aspect and seniors co-housing. And I will touch on a couple of others as well, but there are more than what we have time for today. And there will be other speakers on some of the other subjects and options that you have. And we'll talk about the process on how to get there and the implementation once it's completed, and the move-in. And then we'll talk about the summary, pulling things together, and there'll be references and credits at the end. So that's where we'll go into the introductions first of all, and just a little bit about myself and my family. So the picture on the left is my father's house of late. It was his cousin's house before that, and he acquired it in the process, and lived in that for a number of years, probably about 15 or 20 years, and to the point where he had to move out. So in the middle is actually his mother, who was on the stoop of the house, the same house we're looking at a number of years earlier. Of course, probably in the 50s, I would say. She's a lady who had, believe it or not, 14 children. My dad was in the middle, and he was the longest lived. He died about 4 years ago now, and so he lived in this house as long as he could. And we'll go through that scenario a little bit later. And on the right hand side is he was very, very, very happy to be with his great grandchildren and playing music in this house. And that was he envisioned himself living in this house till he couldn't live there anymore, and hope to be able to die in the house or that somebody would take over it. So this is actually when we were moving out of the house that we took these photos here. So from there, he moved into the one on the top left, which is a senior's apartment in the same village, about half an hour north of Guelph, called Drayton. So this is the only senior's apartment in town that he was able to go to, and it was all on one floor. He was in there a couple of years or so, and he fell and broke his hip. He had Parkinson's and wasn't very stable on his feet, so that wasn't too much of a surprise. But he didn't really prepare with the home that he had, and I showed you on the first slide there. It had steps in it. It was very rickety. It wasn't well heated or anything, and it was really, it should have been knocked down probably. And I told him many years ago that he should have knocked it down and built something more suitable to his aging, his condition, but he didn't do that. So he ended up there, broke his hip, ended up in the hospital for a while. There wasn't much he could do, and they tried to put him into continuing care and therapy, physiotherapy and that type of thing, but he didn't have the cognitive ability to follow through with that. So there didn't seem to be any alternative for him other than to end up in a long-term care facility, which he did in Guelph, which is St. Joseph's Long-Term Care, which is just a couple of blocks away from where I live in Guelph. And he actually was very happy there. It was quite a pleasant experience for him. He quite liked being in the company of other people. He had been on his own for a long time before that, and certainly wasn't very mobile toward the end either. But once he was in there, he was with these buddies, and they had breakfast, lunch, and dinner together, and a lot of chats. So we had a lot of people to talk to. He was a very sociable person. And in fact, when he was in his village, he had a sign out front. He called himself the village philosopher. So when he got to a captive audience in the long-term care facility, he was in his element, and he really liked that. So he lasted about 5 years there, believe it or not, and he got what I would consider fairly reasonable care for his condition. So beyond that, I just want to look at the needs and wishes and wants that most people have, I guess, in our society and our culture, and that might be a couple of things. That one on I left was a house that I designed near Durham, Ontario, actually, and it was in the woods, beautiful place. It was a straw bale building, actually. And of course, people want to be on water, and they see the countryside as kind of their dream place to age in many ways, but they want to be independent of the family and on their own and have stability and not have their family concerned about them. So some of the other things that we usually would want is people proximity to shopping and other amenities that people are accustomed to in their neighborhood or nearby. Usually, hopefully, people lose the eventually the ability. Whoops, something happened there. So we skipped ahead quite a bit. I think I went across the screen. Oh, there we go. So yeah, so we look for these amenities in close proximity, especially when we're not driving anymore to get a little further afield, or if they don't have public transit and means of getting around. Again, people like not only the house they're in, but they like the neighborhood and the attachment to the streets and other friends that they have in the community. And we look at increased density so people can age in place and still have their family around them and their friends. So certainly want to have access to a number of things that we're familiar with, whatever your conditions are, but usually healthcare comes into it with the regular visits. Normally people take as they age on and get less mobile. Um, Other things people are looking for, and I'm looking at some of my own years here. This was a family house that we had on Georgian Bay. And in the family years when the kids were teenagers and that type of thing, it was a great place to be, but it had a lot of stairs and pretty much stairs all the way into the house and from there inside to 4 different levels. So it was not accessible and it wasn't of interest to our children. So we had decided to, I guess, downsize in some ways and become all on one level. So I built a place very close to my office in Guelph, and this was our retirement preference to live in a place in town, all on one floor level. And we even had a place that we could have a caregiver live in. And it was fine for the time, but a little bit more maintenance than what we'd really want. So it was a gorgeous place, and it was very good for entertaining, music, and occasional visits with the family, a large open area that we could entertain for major events and that type of thing. So it worked well, but it is rather isolated as well. And I did have a knack to go into the county because I'm from Northern Ontario anyway, from Sault Ste. Marie originally. I wanted to be in the bush and always wanted to have a place that would be suitable to retreat to and just have a very quiet place after being on Georgian Bay, which was fairly noisy, I guess you could say. At the very least, this was the opposite of that, a very quiet place on 45 acres of a wooded area. And it's a playground for the grandchildren. We have a pond and a zip line and all kinds of property and trails and various other things there, which is great, but it's a long way away from, I would say, at least 3/4 of an hour for an ambulance to arrive in a place like this. It's up near Shelburne, actually. So it was gorgeous. It's all on one floor level. It's pretty much off the grid and very sustainable, built with natural materials and heated primarily with a cockle oven, a masonry heater. And so very comfortable once you get there. And we get our exercise going back and forth there on weekends and that type of thing as well. So it's a great place to be. Just in terms of where we're at as far as, and I'm 75 years old, and I guess I consider myself perhaps a younger senior, and certainly very active. But when we're looking at some of the other people, we sort of want to be on our own, and I'm semi-retired as an architect, as a retired architect now, and still working with some other firms that do some of the work that I can't do. Certainly the resources that we have as seniors, whatever your job was, there's always a call for some need or advice or any thing you can do in terms of the development world. That's kind of where I'm at now in terms of talking about things like co-housing. And I certainly have an interest in health and various other things as well that are mesh fairly nicely with architecture. And so that's why I'm talking to you today to understand that. But you have to look at everybody basically and the jobs that they have. Certainly, we don't have the skills we used to have when we were younger, and the technology has certainly changed. So it's pretty hard to stay up with the times and stay active in your own profession. But certainly there are a lot of uses in some organizations that I'm involved with. There's a lot of very keen people who are excellent at what they do, and they may take a little longer to do it, but they have lots of time, I guess, in these things. And we do have time, we have experience, and we have interests. And of course, we have a lot of connections as well in the community, which is very welcome because when it comes to the development world, I know that the contractors and the planners and city hall councilors and everything else that are involved in the development process as projects go through. Some of the problems we're working against really is that boomers are struggling to find accessible because we're wealthy in terms of the property we have, generally speaking. And if we own our own home, we still can't find homes that are accessible for us as we age, and certainly on one floor level, hallways, steps, and other amenities that aren't there. And I'll go through some examples. I've done many homes for probably at least 50 years for retired couples and look at what things they have to do. And some of them are very dramatic, actually, in terms of what they can accommodate and what they can't. I just wanted to go over the housing continuum, which is fairly, I guess, self-explanatory. If you look at the left-hand side, well, if you look at the right-hand side, basically people are in their own home, and they're looking at basically from home ownership at a private home through the left-hand side where it's emergency shelters, or you could say homeless even, and certainly there are some seniors who are homeless. But if you look at market housing all the way through private market rental, moving to subsidized rental, and then social housing, supportive housing, transitional housing to emergency shelters. So this is as we move, and it's not necessarily to do with age or your physical condition. Some people start out in emergency shelters and they move backwards, hopefully through the rest of it, and maybe they'd acquire a home in the end. And I have worked on emergency shelters and transitional housing to see what these housing types are like. And so it's something that goes there. When we look at retirement housing in the continuum, the shorter part of it and looking at some of those options are in the same alignment with the previous slide, where you have your home, and it looks at different aspects of that in terms of your environmental footprint, your social, personal care, quality of life, health care, family impact, friends, and sustainability. And certainly the family home, especially as a detached home, has some challenges as far as sustainability is concerned as we age. So very often people are looking at alternatives and moving down to something as a more compact home, or maybe moving into a community and that type of thing. And we'll go through some of those options that people have today that are traditional options, I guess you could say. Then we look at seniors apartments and co-housing, Abbeyfield, co-living, retirement homes, life lease, long-term care, and eventually rehabilitation or chronic care. And the things I'd like to say about these, sometimes it's a one-way street, and people go from a family home right into a hospital sort of thing, which is very unfortunate. They've missed a lot in terms of the living and maybe number of years in jumping through, but for physical conditions or accidents or diseases, sometimes you don't have a lot of choices and you kind of skip through this. My mother went through much of the same sort of a continuum with this, starting with a family home, lived in a mobile home actually for a number of years, and then went to a senior's apartment and as a retirement home, and then finally ended up with long-term care, and she had dementia, and the rest of her days were spent probably, I guess, 5 years or so that she wasn't able to be on her own other than in long-term care because the options weren't there that we're trying to develop today. So we're looking at these aspects and hoping that we can hit all these bases, I guess, or maybe move to a place where we can age in place comfortably and safely and with others, hopefully. So the middle ground as far as the lowest need, as I see it, would be something like a communal living, like co-housing, Abbeyfield, or co-living. And we can talk about some of those options. So the road to change, of course, is never ending, and all we can do is really pace ourselves. So I borrowed a slide from John Lord's Aging and Elder Care, and it talks about the community and the formal systems, informal supports that are out there, and where they meet in the middle, and we can provide the formal and informal support systems that we need to age as we are, and we look at different options for housing in this sweet spot, I guess, in this diagram. And certainly in this, we have the aging community, which is kind of where I'm going today with co-housing. Aging in care, of course, is more active care, and aging in place, which is kind of where a lot of people are and where they want to be. So as you can see, there's a middle ground where we're aging in place-based care. So it's a location and circumstances where you're aging in care, whoever's providing it, whether it's others or family even. So lots of options with this. So going to a book that Atul Gawande wrote, he was quite an interesting author, and he basically is a physician and a surgeon, I believe. He looked at the historical life trajectory that we had, and we lived along our years. There's no scale on this, of course. This could happen very early. It could happen very quickly. But basically, what happened is that there wasn't a great need for places like long-term care. There weren't even many hospitals. I know I'm doing some historical articles and research into a distant cousin of mine who was an architect, and he worked right up until he was about 85, and then he died very quickly at 87, within a couple of weeks of being downtown doing his visits and that type of thing. So this is the type of thing that happened. This was in 1958, actually, when he passed away. So this was the thing, and I'm sure you know a lot of people who've gone through this type of thing. They didn't have the facilities and treatments that are followed today. With the chronic illness, which is more like what my parents went through, they had a bit of a dip. My dad had a heart condition when he was in his 50s, actually, and slipped, and then he regained again, and he actually lived for another 40 years after having bypass surgery. So it was really good. It wasn't as abrupt, but he certainly has his ups and downs, as you see here, and eventually, it declines over a period of time to the point where they don't receive any more care. What we're looking at is a trajectory today is more like this one, where we have a lot more treatments. We're probably looking at ourselves a little better, provided we can have the medical care that we need, and that's always subject to some change and challenges in terms of getting the right care at the right time. But we do need to get care a lot longer, and our life expectancy has certainly increased, and our quality of life is increased as well. So it's a gradual decline, I guess, as you go through. So I'm going to point out an example here, which is rather drastic and unfortunate, but this was a couple that who lived very close to me in the township near Shelburne, and he was an airline traffic controller, and she was a legal clerk, I guess. And they built this home. This was their home township, and they built this home as a reproduction farmhouse, and did a lot of work on it. Lived there for a number of years. And we're really proud of the gardens they had and that type of thing. And the way things happened with them, though, they had just gone into retirement, quite enjoying it there, enjoying the grandchildren and the good life they had there on about 5 acres of rural property. And he was out cutting wood one day, and they were cutting a tree down together, and he had to go back to get a wedge or something back to the shop. And when he came back, the tree had fallen on his wife. And unfortunately, through the circumstances, she survived, but she turned out to be a paraplegic. They were no longer able to live in the house because it had so many steps, 3 floor levels. The one on the right is the picture before the addition they put on. So I certainly felt very sorry for them, and I offered my time gratis and to do the design of this, and I only invoiced them for the staff time that had to go into doing this. So this was an addition that we put on. This was built about 2 years after her unfortunate accident, and she'd been a long time in Sunnybrook Hospital, I believe it was, and gone through a number of surgeries, and it ended up that she could get around in a motorized wheelchair, but had no access to the house, even with a ramp. So, which was way too heavy for them to move. So he could only lift her, out of her chair and back in again. So, on very temporary basis for his visit. So we put this addition on, and the addition provided levels to all three floor levels. And so we come in on the ground floor level at the lower level here, and then you go to the main floor where the kitchen, living room, dining room is today. And then the second floor was primarily renovated for her uses. So this is the suite that she was in, and certainly everything was designed ultimately to her abilities. And we built the elevator. The elevator was large enough even for her to turn around in her motorized wheelchair, which was about 8 feet in diameter, sort of thing. And the concern that they had was about what would happen if they had a fire in the house. And so what I did is I created an area of refuge, which was fire separated from the rest of the building just through the door here. So if a fire would happen, she'd be able to go into that area and be able to be rescued, without interfering with the rest of the house. So things like that we're able to accomplish, but they had a fair budget to go through this, and eventually they survived there quite nicely. So it was a good thing in the end, but unfortunate for the accident. But that's a tragic thing that happens, and I'm sure all of you can think of similarities in people that you know who are aging in place. In terms of what we're looking at, the family home is very different. Obviously, with my grandmother and 14 kids, they never did live all together because the older ones had moved out, of course, before the younger ones were born. But it was quite a household as I remember it, and growing up with her. But we're looking at different things that people want to stay in touch, and we want to look at increased care. So this is actually the Raging Grannies, part of a group called SCAN. I don't know if some of you may know SCAN, Seniors for Climate Action Now. And they were performing at an event here at a nearby event, and they go around doing this type of thing. So it's a lot of fun, and certainly seniors involved in this of all ages, and sing and have a great time. Um, I talked before about seniors stuck in their homes. The other thing is that what's happening now, they're finding in a number of studies, is the next generation is not looking at living in the same neighborhoods necessarily as the seniors who are looking to downsize. Often they have a lot more space than they need as they're starting out in their homes and they can't afford them. And it's not necessarily where they'd want to live in terms of neighborhoods or even city. So none of my children are living in the same city that I'm in now, and so we're having to travel, and they have different preferences. One as far away as Vancouver. So we're looking at different things as far as their needs are concerned, and there's a bit of an issue to do with that because there are I think it's in another slide maybe, but we're finding that there are more bedrooms, extra bedrooms in seniors' houses than there are in millennials' houses. So more vacancies there than there are in the spaces that millennials with the children are having. So certainly the finances are a big challenge as far as the outcome is concerned. And I'll go through some of that in more detail later as we move on. So traditional options, I've got a number of them here, which you're all familiar with, and living in smaller townhouses, apartments, rental apartments, or a phased community where it goes from even compact homes right through to long-term care. So living in these communities is the choice of a number of people, and they're quite happy there as well. Although I guess the downside of that for me would be to live in a more diverse community, more familiar with where I grew up and have lived most of my life. So I have some issues to do with some of those homes that are more gated communities. So we certainly look at adaptive reuse as far as buildings are concerned. The one on the bottom is a school, a few blocks away from here, a 6-unit condominium development is a renovated school. And it's very nice, actually. And the other one is a renovated factory, uh, textile factory in Guelph. This is an interesting one. I did a lot of work for a guy who owned a clothing store in Arthur, Ontario, and he wanted to be close to the store because he had grown the store and was quite successful in that. There were a couple of things that he couldn't do. They had to have separate bedrooms when they built their new house because she had a condition where they couldn't sleep together. And he also, something I know a lot of people like to have, especially seniors, he has a drive-through garage. So you drive in one side and you drive straight through the garage door to each side and you come around the other side. So it's something that he needed. So this was a custom home for their needs and it's all on one level. And as far as I know, they're still living there quite happily. This is another retirement home again for a couple of profs at U of G who retired and wanted to live close there. So they have a lovely home here that's designed for their uses. Unfortunately, the Matchbox home that at the bottom left had to be demolished, and we built a new home for their uses, all on one floor with a half floor on the second floor for their children. So there's a number of things. There's, some people have different needs, of course, in their homes. They want to have space for the children, which might have a couple of bedrooms on another floor level, but certainly want to be central. And this house is located right on the river, really, in Guelph, and on walking trails and that type of thing. So it's a very lovely location. This is a home which was done a long time ago. This was an earth sheltered house actually for a retired couple, and they left for the winters and traveled around North America in their trailer, and they wanted to come back to a place that didn't have a huge heating bill. So it was an ideal site for a south-facing slope and to build a trome wall with this greenhouse type wall. And the whole house was heated actually with that. They didn't need any supplementary heating at all. And the last time I was there, she was over 90 and she was going out cross-country skiing that day. He had passed on, unfortunately, but she was still living in the house and very happy there. She said, "There's not taking me out of here at all," even though this is up near Mount Forest, so not a most accessible place, but they were certainly very happy and a very lovely time that they had there. Back to the city again, we're looking at a situation here. This was a cooperative housing, affordable co-op rental housing, and these people, they were 2 and 3 bedroom units built for families, young families. So of course, what happened that nobody imagined is that these people their children would grow up and leave home, and the people who originated there had 2 or 3 bedrooms that they didn't need. So there were some singles and couples and that type of thing, and they didn't have any accommodation in the cooperative. They had their community there that they developed and lived in for many, many years, and they had no option other than to move out. So what we did was we looked at the option of taking the common house there and turning it into 1 bedroom apartments. And the idea there was to build, I think it was 12 1 bedroom apartments. This project is just in the design stage at this point, but it's something that sometimes can happen. Or we also looked at the opportunity to demolish some of the units or renovate them, but it was going to be extremely costly to do that. And it's really a shame when people live in a cooperative or something like that and want to stay in their community and don't have any options to downsize there. This is kind of the other extreme as well, also on Georgian Bay, just near Meaford. And this was a beautiful house, gorgeous lot. We demolished a cottage that was there. And this gentleman and wife, they had an idea in terms of healthy buildings to build something that was extremely healthy. And they used all of the natural materials. They also, so they have the unit on the right is kind of their unit as a couple. In the middle, the plan on the bottom left is the dining, living, common areas, kitchen, and that. And on the left-hand side is a 2-story area which can be rented out either singly or separately to 2 different 1 bedroom units or a single 3 bedroom suite. So it could be family, it could be other people who are wanting to live in a safe and healthy environment with environmental sensitivities and that type of thing. And it's kind of a unique sort of living arrangement, and they're still doing quite well and quite happy with this location. Certainly living with family, moving on to another more intensive use. This is an article I ran into in BC where they built a whole development with, I believe it's four different units built on this property. And they had each had their own property, and you can do that type of thing now with most planning accumulated, and you can get the approval to move very directly into a co-housing arrangement or multiple units on the same property. So that's another very satisfactory. So moving more over into the innovative choices, we can look at a lot of different things from co-housing to pocket neighborhood second units, NORCs, and right down to intergenerational housing and nursing homes. So we're not going to use all that terminology necessarily, but the future owners are involved in co-housing. So the differences between traditional housing and co-housing is that the owners are involved in the development process from the beginning, and we develop a sense of community just working with them in the design and approvals and building of the units. And certainly, and I'll go into more of the detail as far as the procedure is concerned and eventually end up there. So that's the whole idea. In terms of how the flow works with the traditional housing, if the street is on the left, you have your front yard, you have maybe a parking area, garage, you have your entry, you have your kitchen, dining, living room, and then the bedrooms either on the second floor or the ground floor, and then your backyard, which is again is a nice private space. And this is the way most people in North America are living now, and you kind of have your privacy in the front a little bit, and you have your very private place outdoors in the back, and the living room and dining room, and these other areas and bedrooms and that type of thing again are quite private. So you really don't need to connect too much with the neighbors. Sometimes they're built right cheek to jowl next to each other with very little space in between, if any. With co-housing connections, it's kind of a different thing. It kind of turns things around, and the street again is on the left. You have a front yard that might be the parking and the bikes and that type of thing in a garden area. And that's usually as far as the car goes on the property. So the property from there becomes pedestrian, where you're more inclined to meet other people, to rub shoulders, say hi, have a story with them, talk about their day or whatever. So the main entry is either through the common house, so you may go through that physically, depending on the type of building you're looking at, or you can go through a common yard, a deck, or a patio, and eventually you end up at your unit to wherever it is on the property. It might be, very close. It might be some distance away, and certainly it presents challenges, in terms of moving things back and forth. But certainly, moving from supermarkets to home anyway, you'd have a cart or something like that to bring heavier things, or moving days move that way. So generally speaking, we try to orient the kitchen toward the common space because people spend a lot of their waking hours in the kitchen looking out the window, and that's where you connect with your neighbors. I remember my mom when she was living in her mobile home, or she would look at her neighbors, and they would know when the lights went on in the home and what condition they were in. They were kind of looking out for each other and things like that. The same sort of thing with co-housing. So you have your kitchens kind of looking out. Very often people take their meal out to the deck and have it out there, even if they didn't prepare a communal meal. And then everybody's very close to the common house, which would have a kitchen, playroom, guest room, large gathering area, and that type of thing. And of course, this would be repeated around the development, and several people would be living in these either on the same floor level or on different buildings. So it's the same kind of relationship diagram we'd have for apartment buildings or anything else. Abbey Fields are much the same. I don't want to get too much into Abbey Fields because I want to concentrate on co-housing, but people know how they work, and Abbey Fields work very nicely as a group. And this is a model I think that's very well designed in Durham, Ontario, and certainly it's a shared accommodation with each person with their individual room and bathroom, and you have shared meals and kitchen and other activity spaces in that. So you're shared with between 10 and 16 people, sort of thing. And it certainly is much more economical to live this way too, and certainly more lasting. This is not so successful actually, but it was a second Abbeyfield home in Canada, believe it or not. It happened just down the street from me here in Guelph. And it wasn't the right property, I'd have to say. It's not an Abbeyfield today, and for many reasons. One is that we had two rooms in the basement. We had the ground floor was the living room, dining room, kitchen. The second floor was three bedrooms, and then the top suite was a housekeeper's suite who lived on site. So because there were so many stairs, and you can see at the entrance, there's about 8 steps just to get into the building, and no lift or anything going into it. It would have been really difficult to try to get to all the floor levels, and even trying to get stairways for fire exits and that type of thing was a challenge. So it was probably too small and too many steps and not really built for people to age in place. And it turned out to be just a rental building. It was owned by, continues to be owned actually by the St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church, and there was a Rotary Club that I was involved with. I was the developer of it. So it was a lesson learned in how not to do Abbey Fields for sure. So certainly the stakes have gone up, and this was like I said, the first one, and it was a learning experience for a lot of people involved. So in terms of alternatives, again, there's a really good report on alternatives to long-term care that you can read. It's a good document to start with. Certainly, there's some issues to do with some of the details in it, but as far as co-housing is concerned, they've got the benefits and the limitations of those, and I'll go through with those after going through the experience myself with watershed co-housing. This is actually the first urban co-housing development in Canada or in Ontario, terra firma in Ottawa. It's been up 25 years, and believe it or not, it's the same 25 units that were there, or 25 years ago. The 7 units they have were still there, and all the original owners were still in place until this year. I understand that they're trying to sell a unit that one of the people is leaving. So for 25 years, not very many people age in place for 25 years necessarily, or even stay in their own house if they have a family that long. It's kind of rare. It's because of the location in the community, I think, that a lot of that happened. Windsong was a very early co-housing community just outside Vancouver. And very nice interior street here. Units open to the outside and also to the inside here on the ground floor level. And you have this communal space on the inside of the building that's very much a shared space. You can see that people are furnishing it and using it as a front yard and a backyard, I guess, too, in some ways. And certainly it's a communal space where you want to meet people. You can't really go anywhere without meeting some people in situations like this. It's really designed to make connections with people and live in community. Other ways of doing it are with balconies, common balconies. You can see people having conversations and children playing in this area. The center of the whole thing in a courtyard is the playground and a mature oak tree, I believe it is, in the center. This is in Portland, Oregon, and a really nice development. I really like that, and I use some of the features of that in my design at Watershed, actually. Cranberry Common is another one with an interior courtyard you can see on the left, and then it's open out into the street on the other side, so it has a communal connection to the neighborhood as well as to the interior with common space on the inside. And you see a lack of cars and that type of thing on the inside. Very often these places will have they'll have children's playgrounds and that type of thing in there. So a couple of other examples of that too. Daybreak is the one there. You can see the tree in the back on the left there. And then this one, the sunset isn't always like that, but this was in North Vancouver and Quayside co-housing. They actually have a commercial unit there. The bottom floor was originally a convenience store. Moving on to Whole Village is another one that's a rural village or whole village on about 90 or 100 acres near Caledon. And the unfortunate things there's a number of things that happen there. They could only have one kitchen because of the zoning. So nobody could have their individual kitchen. They had to have a communal kitchen all the way through. They could just have an unkitchen. You can see at the bottom there, which is just kind of a lunch counter, I guess you could say. That's as far as they can go, is have a little bit of a kitchen. A couple of other examples. I'll move on with that. And we're looking at one that's built into the neighborhood very nicely. Another one in Windsong here, just as far as the entrance is concerned. So this is how you enter the whole community, is through these common spaces, and there'll be common spaces with kitchens and places for care, nurseries, and that type of thing as well. This one's another one in Vancouver that's very nicely designed. You walk in, and this is the view you see inside the entrance, the one in the center here. And it's very successful, and it's a diverse community. So they're very compact units, and people come out into the common space, and you have this interior space that's indoor and outdoor and private and still common. Harborside is a really good one. I'm going through this one fairly quickly, but I think it's the most successful of a seniors co-housing community in Canada. 31 acres on 2 acres, 31 units on 2 acres. That's spread on the waterfront, and they have a wharf there as well. So it's a very successful community. It's been going for about 10 years now, I believe. And so they have a main common building, and then they have smaller units that have 2 or 3 units per pod, you could say. And everybody has a view out to the bay there. And so it's very successful. The challenge is it's built on quite a slope, but it is accessible up and down, and certainly with elevators in the main building. So these are the views you get from some of the units. very nicely done. And this is inside the units where you have a very open concept with the living room, dining room, and then we have a den that's kind of a guest suite and a study area. This is the common house. In the common house, they have at least two guest rooms and dining room. The original lodge that was on the property before is the common house for those facilities. This is another one going into Vancouver, and really clever idea. It's sometimes a real challenge to try to get a common space in an apartment building. But one of the things they did there at Little Mountain, which has only been open a couple of years now, is that they built the common house is straight ahead, and the elevator is actually in the common room. So you come into a space like the entry lounge there on the right, and you come into the space when you turn around and go into the common room. So if there's anything going in the common room, you can't just go into the elevator, sneak your way up the stairs. You actually become engaged with whatever's going on in the common house, and that builds community as well. And the kitchen is open to the common area as well. So any food that's going there, you get the aromas, you see people eating there, you have coffee, you have meetings, you just have chance encounters with people, and certainly getting the mail is a procedure that's also communal, whatever you're doing. I could talk for a long time about watershed co-housing. This was a second urban co-housing project in Ontario. And so basically, I took a property that I owned and had an additional property at the back. And we demolished a house and two garages and built 5 units on the back with a parking area, and then opened this. We've been in just over 2 years, about two years and a couple of months, and it was a very established neighborhood within 10-minute walk to downtown Guelph. It has a space that we can use as a collaborative office space as well for people who work part-time like I do, which we're actually converting to a 7th unit now. So we don't need as much office space as we had before COVID. So we're turning that into another residential unit. And we're going to have a unit for sale, or we do have a unit for sale there now because we do have that extra unit. So if anybody's interested, you can contact me through the chat line. So the split units themselves are an open, spacious plan, and we have a common space. We have per unit, we have about 185 square feet of additional space to the 1,000 square feet that people have in their own units. So the common house that we have on the 3rd floor here is a 20 by 40-foot room plus a couple of alcoves. And we use that for yoga and for meditation, for meetings and for potlucks. And we have the Raging Grannies practice there. We have a number of groups that meet there as well. So it's very successful on a fairly small piece of property. We don't have a lot of garden space, but we do have vertical gardens and edible landscaping as well. There's another project to go through very quickly that's on the board still, that we have the zoning in place and we're just ready for more people to be joining this community. It's grassroots co-housing in Guelph, just a couple of kilometers from where we are in downtown Guelph here. So again, it's built it as an urban woodlot, which is absolutely gorgeous. And there's about 24 units built on this one, retaining one existing house on that as well. So how do you evaluate all these options? In terms of looking what you're doing here, certainly we look at making decisions with a group of people in the design process. We're looking at consent, not necessarily 100% consensus. So it's kind of an adapted thing. So things are adopted on the basis of can you live with it sort of thing. Is it within your range of a tolerance? So there's a process and courses that we took on that type of thing as well to get to that stage. So certainly co-housing has a lot of involvement in the people from the beginning, and you have a lot of say in terms of what you can do. So it's almost like building 6 or 8 or 10 individual apartments, although there's an economy on building them very similar. So the process is when you get started, you set up a group. It starts with the people. It's a different process than what you do as a developer project where they build it and you basically look at your unit and buy it and come and move in. So it's a process where you're involved from the beginning. So you set up your communities. We had a conversation several years ago now with Dan Leaf Christian, who's an author of a book on creating co-housing. And we had over 90 people show up at that from all over the province, actually. And so that got the message going about co-housing. And we built from there. We went and took Courses in communication, sociocracy, and that type of thing. We had a number of people involved in that. We went camping, visited a number of communities. Site selection is coming later. So once you get the group together, you start talking about the idea of what do people want, where do you want to live, and some people dropped out because they didn't want to live in that particular location, and they moved on and came to other conclusions. It can be urban, rural, you can be diverse, it can be seniors, it can be younger families, or a mixture. So we looked at the properties. A bit of a sideline here is to talk about the community land trusts. There's also a community land trust in Guelph that is looking to acquire property. And what they're doing is called the Junction Village Community Land Trust. And the advantage of this is it becomes a lot more affordable when you can take the cost of the property, the evaluation of the property away from the cost of any improvements, such as the buildings. So it's separate ownership. The community land trust owns the property in perpetuity, and any construction that goes on site is either built by the community land trust or by others, by other developers or individuals or groups. And then they basically, if it comes to the time where they want to sell, they can sell the buildings, but the land remains as whatever they put as their core values. And usually it's a not-for-profit. In fact, I think all community land trusts are not-for-profit, and they would put affordable housing there. So it's one avenue that the municipality has. If the municipality has extra land, they can sell it to a community land trust, or donate it, I should say, to a community land trust. And once the community land trust acquires it, they can say in perpetuity that this land is going to be used for affordable housing or for seniors housing or for whatever values they have. So it's something the municipalities are not permitted to do, apparently. They can't say that a certain property is for affordable housing. Their hands are tied with that. But once the land is transferred to a community land trust, and then the community land trust has a set of values that says this property in perpetuity is going to be for supportive housing, then that's the way it'll remain. So that's a way of a tool, I guess, or an avenue that they can take to get affordable housing into a community without any losses. So private individuals can certainly give land or sell land to a community land trust. They're very successful. They're much larger in the States than they are in Canada. I believe there's over 40 now in Canada, and a number of them very successfully in Toronto and Ottawa, apparently. And they've acquired quite a numbers of properties and all kinds of different properties as well, with different kinds of development on them. Certainly seniors are a major part of that as well, so they can decide on what the mix is going to be in terms of how the buildings are happening. So this can happen. Terms of the next space after acquiring the property, you look at the design and development. That's a lot of fun. It brings a lot of people together. You really coalesce as a group and you grow together. You have to make all these decisions. You go through the whole design process with the architect and the planners and designers, and people get a say and you make decisions all the way through. So we do the drawings and do the designs, get the approvals on it, and go to contracting. As far as construction of the project, you go to guesstimates. Financing is an issue, another process itself, and approvals of site plans and building permits as well. Eventually, you get to the construction, and you get a contractor on site, and you start the construction on those. So these are a couple of early stages, and we look at mock-ups of some of the construction. This building was built to passive house criteria, so the insulation and air barriers and that type of thing. They've mocked up on the top left there, and we're just taking a look at them to make sure they get the amount of insulation they need over top of the concrete block that's there as the construction. So delivery options as far as construction are concerned, you can go to owner build. So you design, bid it, and build it. Or well, the owner can build it, and that's kind of, well, it's kind of what we did. I was the owner of the property. I was the owner of the development company in this particular case. You could design, bid, build. So you'd hire an architect, design the building, you put it out to tender, get the best price on it, and have somebody build it. Construction management is kind of in between, where you'd hire a construction manager. They would look after the construction of the building and design it or build it according to the standards and under the supervision of the architect. Project management is where you'd have a project manager over the whole process, and they would actually hire all the consultants and they'd hire a contractor and basically turn the project over at the end. So the amount of control that the co-housing community would have is different from all of these project deliveries. And the way that we had discussions, because I was the developer, I was also intended to live here. And as the owner and the architect and kind of an owner, I was involved in it. But then we had, through the construction process, because of the financing, it ended up that ahead and did the construction. We still had to go out and borrow money, and we built through COVID, which was not a very nice thing to do, and there were a lot of cost overruns as well. So we still have mortgages on a number of the units, and the common space. Well, not the common space, I shouldn't say, but on two of the units at least. So the completion was the happy day, and we moved in. We had celebrations, doing some of our own painting here and finishing. And you might recall Mike uh, is the member of parliament, provincial parliament there, Mike Schreiner. So implementation, once we get in, that's the beginning. The move in is one thing, but we all come together, and that's when the fun begins. We converted to a condominium. Then after we rented for the first year while we were turning over to a condominium, and we were working with that in turning over to condominium. So that was just done last year, actually, about a year with quite a year ago. So true belonging doesn't require you to change who you are. It requires to be who you are. So it accepts all kinds of people, and we do have people of all stripes here. So long-term care or small care homes is a place where we're looking to go with some of this as a future innovation, I guess you could say. And here we're looking at a chart that put all the provinces together. So you can see from Alberta right through to the Yukon, the different provinces and territories have different progress as far as they're concerned. In some places, they're much further along. Ontario at the bottom, I've highlighted here as no current initiatives, which have been identified supporting development of small care homes. So there's a challenge to people in Ontario now, and we have a long way to go to catch up with some of these things, especially for not-for-profit small homes. And here's a couple of examples, again, not taken from Ontario, but from actually the States. So the one on the bottom right is a single-story small care home. The one on the top left is more of an apartment one. So I think both of these, and it's kind of into different homes on the one on the top left. So it's more like an apartment type building. But on a floor, you would have a couple of sort of small care homes. And these would have a housekeeper or somebody to do the cooking generally. But the residents themselves would have a lot more participation in terms of how they're living there. So this could be close. It's kind of the in between co-housing and full care home, but it certainly could be a licensed long-term care facility, and they're looking at that. They certainly have a couple of them in Alberta as well. So the design requirements checklist, and this is borrowed again from Alberta, this is what they have as a checklist for the small care homes in terms of what they're doing, and they're contemplating doing licensing of these facilities as well. And they're still trying to get financing for these as well from the provincial government. So they're certainly charting new territory for that. Just generally, I wanted to talk about some of the details, and I could go on with this for a long time, but talked about passive buildings. It's a high level of building sustainability and comfort, looking at the ventilation, heating, windows, thermal bridging insulation, various other things. And along with that, we instituted a number of things in building biology, which is a healthy building criteria. They have 25 biology principles. And I'm a building biologist as well by trade. And we look at a lot of these things, the 25 principles that make a building healthy to live in and certainly to age in. So that's something that we brought into the watershed co-housing as well. So it's not the normal building. And there are no comparables actually in Ontario at all for that. So accessibility, certain universal accessibility is a given for not for every unit necessarily, but certainly we had a decision to make in watershed whether we provide an elevator to all 6 of the floor levels, because we had actually 4 on the original building, and then we had 3 new levels on the new building, and we have an elevator with 6 stops on it. The cost of that was $100,000, and we had to make a decision: are we going to go ahead with the elevator or not? Nobody required it at the time, but universally everybody said no. We have to. We'll put out the extra dollars and we'll pay for the elevator and we'll put it in from the get-go. And certainly since then we haven't regretted it because other people have had operations where they require an elevator that has to happen. And certainly the washrooms are there as well. So we do have one roll-in shower in one of the units, and that is shared on occasion. So one of the units has that, and we've had to share it with other people, which is fine. When you're in co-housing, it's one of the givens. You share everything. So just as far as the summary is concerned, I just want to wrap it up fairly quickly here, but I could spend a lot more time in questions with this, is to stay ahead of the curve in terms of where you're going to be. Certainly to think ahead, because something that a lot of seniors don't acknowledge, and I don't really know why. Maybe some people can answer that question, why people don't think of where they're going to be in 5 or 10 or 15 years with diminishing mobility or whatever. And certainly advocate for a paradigm shift in healthcare and funding, because that's very important to get the funding down to the people who are actually providing the care, whether it be a partner or a relative or an outside caregiver. You want to have, it's very important to have some say in that matter. Prepared for climate change, political turbulence, and economic challenges. I think we need to talk about that. We could go on all day for that, how we're going to survive all this. I just got an article last week. I didn't talk about it really, but the architecture about co-housing really makes a lot of difference. And this gentleman on his 101st birthday, as the original owner, the last original owner of the Frank Lloyd Wright House in the States, and surrounded by the beauty, he credits the architecture as extending his life by years, enriching his life. So that's just a pitch for architecture, I guess. But certainly the architecture makes a difference, because the way you design a place would either, and you're designing from the beginning, so you're designing for the clientele in the end. So you're not just designing for somebody hypothetically, and you're designing to engage people with having to connect with each other. Whereas you can remember from the flow diagram I showed you before, the tendency for buildings in North America is to have them more private. So they value the privacy and the independence of people and privacy than for the communal good. So that's why, in my view, a place like Denmark is the leader in co-housing and communal living in all levels. And we're less progressive in that type of thing because we're more individually oriented in North America. So a number of things that can happen in terms of pilot homes and that type of thing. These are places we could go, future things to do. And, it's kind of a to-do list as we get down there and design places that are appropriate for First Nations, New Canadians, because the foods and the cultures and the worship practices and various other things are different, as they are for some specialized care. The places have to be designed for that particularly. In Malcolm Gladwell's recent book, he talks about the tipping point being about 1/3. Once it goes over that 1/3, it's not normally accepted. And we're looking at the existence of tipping points being an irresistible opportunity to engage in social engineering in his latest book. And I guess I put the question, are we as seniors living in a community approaching a tipping point? And I don't know where that happens and how that happens. But that's why we're opening the door to this possibility. I'm just going to flash through a number of references. These are usually books that have been written recently, and these are covers of those, and these are going out with the recording, so you'll be able to see some of these. Certainly a seminal book in my learning of it and other talks is with John Lord in Aging and Elder Care. He didn't talk too much about the architecture or the buildings particularly, because there weren't a lot of examples out there to follow. So now that we have at least one co-housing urban community in Ontario, a 6-7 unit, it's a pretty good example of where to start. It wasn't specifically designed as a new building that way, but I think we can follow a lot and meet a lot of the examples for care that John Lord is looking at in his book, which I'm sure a lot of you have bought. A couple of other books as well. Chuck Durrett is a well-known architect who's designed the most number of co-housing communities in North America. And there's creating co-housing. This is for some of them seniors, and other studies have been done as well. There's certainly a lot of specialties in terms of dementia care, and that's a growing field, and for Alzheimer's as well. there's a couple of architectural theses that I've been an advisor for at university level for a master's in architecture. So those are, again, efforts. One is a very cultural one as well. So it's very interesting from that point of view. So, like I say, there's some studies available and, certainly a lot of reading. There is or was a magazine called Communities Magazine. I think it's probably still out there online. And that's a resource that people can look at. And there's how-to guides that are out there and how to do that as well. So there's certainly a number of sites that people could go to look for alternatives to care. Another couple of things I'd just bring in is biophilia is a design to bring it's inspired by nature is actually what it means. But this is a building that I built in Guelph, which is you could say a care home. It's actually a hospice, but it is designed. The center feature of this building is a living wall, and it has a water fountain that's constantly watering the system, and it has outdoor gardens and that type of thing. So biophilia is something that's really important in terms of plant space and animal space in some of these buildings as well. Credits, just finalizing the credits, and again, I'll leave these for people to refer to later from the recording, and just found that a lot more people than that I have to thank for the research that I've done in terms of preparing this, conversations that I've had, meetings, and websites and that type of thing. But certainly, Harry and Trish have been incredibly helpful in this whole process. So what you do makes a difference, and what you do, you have to decide what kind of difference you're going to make. My Jane Goodall. So I'll leave this up and open things. I'll turn things over to Trish again, and we can open things for questions.
Yes, and I'm just looking at everyone's smiling faces. I think this has been quite inspiring for a lot of people, David. And so thank you, and a thank you for the thoroughness of it. If people want to make a comment or ask a question, if you go to your React button at the bottom of your screen, it says raise hand. So if you just click on that, if I see hands going up, I will call on you. So anyone who would like to ask a question, now would be the time. So I'm just watching everybody here to see whether anybody is wanting. Cynthia, you raised your hand. Go ahead.
Hello.
Hello.
This is very exciting for me. Um, about a quarter of a century ago, I lived on Vancouver Island and I knew people who started Pacific Gardens, as you may very well know. You're nodding your head, David.
I've been there,
And
yep.
so, and now, like, they remind me of that old Leonard Cohen song, first we take Manhattan, then we take Berlin, because they're starting, Duncan, Chemainus, Long Lake, it's like, and here I am in Oshawa, and it's like, how do I find my people? So I chatted that I'm going to start advertising on cohousing.ca because it's only $50 annually. And I want to be in Whitby or Oshawa because that's sort of where everything is for me. And I hate where I live. I hate condo living. I have a place that's way, way, way too big for me. And, it's like I don't really know how to go about it. I look on these sites, I look at ic.org all the time, and you talk to people and they're all in the same boat, but how do you congregate and how you get together? And one thing that I've noticed that is seniors places that are really open to proactivity, like up in Peterborough, they have access to their senior centers. People up in Whitevale, they have access to their community center where they can congregate and do things together. And it's like where I am right now, it's like a void. I know of 3 places in Guelph. I saw the video of the place that you're in, and contact with the Speedvale and also the
Mhm.
Junction Village, right? But it's like I just don't know how to go about doing it where I am.
Yeah, so
I'm all alone.
yeah, the book really, the recipe book really is housing by Ronnie Matthews and Margaret Critchlow. It's in the references I have there. So that we didn't have that knowledge. It just came out not quite a year ago, in fact. It's Canadian, certainly, and they're actually both of them were involved in the founding of the Harborside Co-housing. Very successful, but it's a real how-to book. If we followed that book, we probably would have been built years before. We had to go through, and I mean, we had to tell people locally, and all the neighbors. We had probably 25 neighbors opposed the whole rezoning of the property, not because of co-housing, just because it was different from anything they knew. They only knew single-family detached homes. It's in an established
Yeah,
neighborhood, and
yeah.
so the first step would be to gather a group of people.
How do
So
I find them?
how do you
That's
find
my
them? You
thing.
Cynthia,
basically you could put an ad in the paper, in the seniors bulletins, things like that. Put it on websites. Get it out there to places of worship is one. Wherever seniors gather, certainly buildings. You know a
No,
lot of.
I'm saying that like Oshawa Seniors is
oh,
completely opposed to
Da-
it.
David, if I can just interject, Durham Region is undergoing a major transformation right now, Cynthia, that you may not know about. And Community Care Durham is leading the charge. Be James Meloche at Community Care Durham. Uh,
Jane,
James, James Meloche, Meloche,
MELOCHE.
Oche. He's the executive. He is the executive director of Community Care Durham. So what you want to do is go to that site. Basically, what's happening is we're looking at establishing NORCs, PACE programs, program of all-inclusive care of the elderly. There's some
And
things
what?
already.
Early vote. Vote is
Somebody
next week,
needs to
27th.
mute.
No, but there's early voting today. Oh,
Somebody needs to mute. We're hearing your conversation. So Cynthia, all of that is a lot of stuff is going on right now, and he's established something called One Connect. So you want to find out about One Connect by going to the Community Care Durham website. Okay, Don, you have your hand up. You're next. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually in British Columbia right now, planning to move back to Eastern Ontario into the Gananoque, Ottawa area, where my family is. And right now, I'm involved in a group called Fiddlehead Commons. We're under the
Mm,
Ottawa
mhm.
Co-housing Consultant Group. And
Excellent.
really, David, yeah, I just wanted to get your opinion of that group. I'm new to it, the Ottawa Co-housing Group, and are you aware of the Fiddlehead Commons uh, co-housing group that we've started up? And also their architect, Rosalind Hill.
Mhm.
I met her a couple of times online, and she's supposedly going to be helping us with our co-housing design. You want to just talk about Ottawa co-housing a little bit for me, and Rosalind Hill's architectural expertise?
Yeah, certainly. I wish we had groups like that across the province because, and I know they're branching out a little bit further as well, out of just Ottawa and the Ottawa region directly. But they're doing a really good job in terms of connecting people with the right expertise. Certainly, Rosalind Hill, I know her not really well, but she was involved in the design of the Soul Sisters, I think they call it,
Yeah,
in
that's
Ottawa,
right.
which I think believe was the third urban co-housing community in Ontario.
Yeah.
Just shortly, I think a matter of months or weeks after ours was established. But anyway, yeah. So that's really take their advice. I mean, take all the workshops. I even go to the workshops with Linda Krause, and she's been to Watershed. She stayed here for a while, and no, great people there. And I just wish we had similar organizations pushing for co-housing and other forms. I would say as well. It's not unique to that, but no, I have really good confidence in them. But and you do that, and then you buy the community-led housing book. I think you're well on the way, or borrow it from the library. So I know that Linda is quite accustomed to that. The other thing that I can do, and also to Cynthia's question as well, is unfortunately just last when was it, October, we had Critchlow came to at the Ignatius Jesuit community in Guelph because we were going to establish a seniors co-housing development there. It doesn't appear that that one's going ahead now. For anybody who's on the call, I'd appreciate making contact with you. But we had over 50 people come to this talk in October, and she presented her book and the whole process and answered a number of questions. So between that and then the event we had a number of years ago with Dan Leaf Christian, that was another experience. Watershed is not the first co-housing community that I was involved with. I was involved in the one that eventually became Grassroots. But it wasn't going well that fast. So basically, it became a monetary thing. People weren't putting money on the table as early as they should have. And basically, after enjoying a lot of good meetings, design process, and potlucks and trips that we took to visit other places and that type of thing, basically it fell apart. So there's only,
I got my hair
I
cut
think,
today.
five or six people involved in
Greg
it.
there last week. He said you were a great guy and just the
Thank
kind
you.
of person who should be in the field.
So you're muted, I think.
You okay?
Yeah.
Sorry, someone needs to mute because we can hear your conversation.
It's Adrian Crowder. If Adrian Crowder could hear, she could mute herself.
You'll get there. At least
Yeah.
you're getting some sleep.
Adrienne, we can hear you. Okay, David, did you finish your response to Dawn, or shall I go on to the next
Yes, we
two
can go on. I
questions?
think Don's happy with that.
Okay, Sheila and then Denise. So Sheila?
Yeah, hi. I'm actually in Montreal and I'm a part of the Montreal Raging Grannies. We have known about alternatives in housing for a long, long time and been very interested. I remember taking a course on radical rest homes with Janet Torge, who's been trying to lead that charge in Montreal. But then I had the privilege of visiting Harborside, I guess just after they were finished, and fell in love with that concept and of course with that place. But I wasn't about to move out to Souk, British Columbia. So as I have been aging quite happily in my Pointe Claire, Quebec home, I am also part of course, Quebec's politics and not too wonderfully happy about where our healthcare is going. So I just Googled, this is maybe for the woman that was wondering what to do. So I knew about co-housing. I know that I have a daughter who lives near Kingston, Ontario, and I Googled, is there co-housing in Kingston? And I found Kingston Co-housing, which I'm now taking the sociocracy course for, trying to plow through that book, which is fascinating, but big. And part of the group that have a spot. We have a site, a potential site in Providence Village, and are at the now sort of working with Rosalind Hill and trying to figure out design and cost and all those kinds of things. I just was curious, David, if you could talk a little bit about, I don't know if there is a kind of an ideal size that when you move and you want to be affordable, but you want to have enough space that you don't go through shock from leaving I'm in a townhouse to a one level sort of place. What is a good working size of a co-housing unit, have you found?
It really is the individual needs. The ones that we have at Watershed are a lot bigger than what they need to be. 1,000 square feet is kind of generally about what they are within 50 square feet, I would say. All 6 or 7 units that we have here. I think that's on the large size but some will be couples, others will be singles, right? So you might need a wee bit more space for couples. But you have to remember that you have a lot of common facilities as well. So the size of the units is definitely smaller than what you'd look at in other, let's say, retirement homes and things like that, where they have apartments and everybody has their own kitchen, dining room, bathroom, that type of thing. But when you have a communal facility, you don't really have to have a meal for any more than 2 or 3 people, when you could go to the common house and have a kitchen and an event there with up to 15 or 20 people, 30 people maybe even. So that and the other facilities that people have for anything from storage to guest rooms and nurseries and workshops and that type of thing. There's a lot of additional space that's there in communities. So the units can actually be smaller. So I guess I would say for a 1-bedroom unit, I would say anywhere between 500 and 650 something. And if it's accessible, if it's fully accessible, then you're going to need a little bit more space for hallways and circulation. But I
Okay.
think smaller is better number one for cost, but also just to encourage people to be in the common spaces rather than in their units. So I
Yeah.
always tell people it should be a little bit uncomfortable in your unit. You know, it should be private enough that you need it, but there's still, private enough common spaces. I mean, I meditate in the common room every day because nobody else is up at 5 o'clock in the morning. So it works quite nicely as far as I'm concerned. I mean, but then, it can switch over to have 30 people in the room.
Yes, exactly.
So the size, I'd say, keep it small.
Okay.
And we're even doing some, I know with the design I have at Grassroots, we had some bachelor suites. So they're actually a studio apartment. And so it's small enough for one person to be in comfortably with an open concept, maybe with a little bit of privacy for the bed area, sleeping area. But obviously people are doing fine in tiny houses these days as well. So, I
Yeah,
mean, I think there's someplace in between where it's kind of the sweet spot.
exactly. And Mike and Vicky, I want you to know I've seen your hand. You can put it down, Vicky. I'll come to you right after Denise. Okay. Denise, you had a question.
Yeah, thank you so much, David. I think the last time we met was at the Center of
Okay,
Wellington
yeah,
Affordable
remember that.
Housing Symposium. So yeah, and I've been a long-term person working in the housing co-op sector. So I was the first coordinator at Winfield and Guelph back in 1987. So quite a long history. So I also really appreciate the work that you do or did at the Hospice Wellington because I'm on the board and I really love that space. So thank you for that. So I have two questions. One is the structure, the corporate structure of how is it best to, in terms of a business corp, a not-for-profit, or a co-op? Do you have any ideas on that one? And the second is how do we deal with the municipal challenges that we have dealing with bylaws and the NIMBY and all of that kind of stuff. So if you have any thoughts about, I know there's two questions, so right,
Yeah,
but you
sounds
can
great.
choose whichever one you like.
Well, I
And
can give a short
the
answer
other
to both of
one,
them very quickly, but the legal one is you're charting new ground. Um, because especially in Ontario, I don't know if there's any place where it's really a clean sweep. But we had to pay a lawyer to create the documents. We had documents from Seattle, I think it was, in a community we had there. They gave us their legal documents, but they just basically threw it out. It's different laws, different jurisdiction and everything. And so they weren't of any use really to anybody. So eventually we created an agreement, but we also had the loans. So people in the development, the people were coming into the community, had loans to the development corporation, unsecured loans, believe it or not. And so we had to have agreements for basically it was a line of, or not line of credit, a promissory note that people signed for that. So that went through. So that's the level of trust that people have in this whole process and the whole community. Um, so I don't know if that answers your question. I wish there was a lawyer in Ontario who would do that. I'd be happy to share the documents we had with them. It was a development agreement sort of thing. But then over top of that, eventually you're probably going to want to become a condominium corporation. And that we have the Ontario Corporations Act or Condominium Act. And that is kind of, I guess, overriding or parallel with the co-housing community. And we were very clear to mention in the legal documents that we are a co-housing community. It's not just the normal condominium board that makes all the decisions. So we have our directors and then we have everybody. So we don't make any decisions except if everybody's there as far as the condo is concerned. As far as the neighborhood is concerned, that was an issue. It was an education, but remember that was 12 years ago. So there are a number of projects that have come in front of council and neighborhoods since then, where co-housing is pretty much accepted and promoted by the mayor and MPP, MP. They were all here at the opening, and they've been here several times actually. And so it's really out there now. I mean, but we had to have one that people could see. You're welcome to use our example. We will happily take people through and show you what we've done here. So that's a good example. But people don't have the fear factor they had before because you won't believe the book they could write in terms of the snow and the parking and the traffic and the kids and the beer bottles we'd be throwing off the roof and looking into everybody's windows and yada yada. It was horrible. It was laughable, the things that they created. So like I say, at least 25 people opposed it on our street. These are immediate neighbors on our side street here. And but council was very supportive of it. The planners were very supportive of it. And obviously, when we went to the Ontario Land Tribunal, the OMB, they were. It was a 5-day hearing, and it was a gong show. Really, they had no opposition to it at all. It was really they couldn't even get the consultants to oppose it. Basically, it was so really the municipal area is really. A lot easier now than it was then. There weren't any roadblocks with the city other than the normal process of development. And the neighborhood, basically, we have a couple of neighbors who aren't friendly with us, and that's their problem. But there's no grounds for NIMBYism anymore anyway, as far as an appeal is concerned. So for zone changes, if you have it with the city and you have approval there, the neighbors really don't have a say anymore under this government now.
Okay, thank you, David. Mike and Vicky, and then I'm going to come to Dawn, Cynthia, and Sheila in order. Okay, so Mike and Vicky go first. Are you muted? We can't hear you. Can we hear? Yeah, we can't hear you speaking. Is there a way you can type your question in chat and we'll see if we can get David to answer it that way?
Yeah, I do know Mike and Vicky quite well, so
Oh, okay. So,
grassroots co-housing.
all righty. Okay.
So they can get me anyway.
Yeah, we can't hear you, Mike and Vicky, so I'm going to have to go on to Dawn. Dawn, what's your question?
Oh, well, second time here. I just really wanted to give a plug to our project. We're starting our co-housing community, which is just outside of Ottawa, and we're actually looking for members. We've got 5 core members. We've got another 10 interested people who are sort of looking into it, explorers, I guess we call them. And we like to build our community, and we're starting to look at property. So this is about a half hour out of Ottawa. If anybody's interested, please have a look at ottawacohousing.com, and you'll see our project there, Fiddlehead Commons. All right, so if anybody's interested, please get hold of us. We're building our group, and we're really keen on building a co-housing community in Almont, Ontario, just a half hour out of Ottawa. So a beautiful little town. So thanks.
That's great. That's
There's
great,
my plug.
That's great. Thanks for the plug.
Thanks, David.
Vicky, Mike and Vicky, do you want to try your question again? Let me see if I can hear you. No, we still can't hear you. I'm sorry. Okay, Cynthia, I'm going to come to you.
Hello. Yeah. I keep seeing that a lot of co-housing places have the type of it's not called condo, it's called strata, but it's sort of this almost the same as strata, and I don't really understand the difference between the two. You know, I live in a condo. I know there's a corporation, and I have a number what my corporation is here in Durham, and I'm just wondering if there's a difference.
Yeah, I'm not an expert in this legally, but I know I have a son in Vancouver and he was part of a strata before. In fact, I think he still is. It's pretty much the same thing. I don't know other than the name what's different about it, but again, there might be some legal nuances that are slightly different.
I guess I'll just have to research it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think you
okay.
might have
Thanks,
to talk to a lawyer about that.
You're not omniscient.
I don't know that we have any stratas in Ontario, but we do have a lot of condominiums. And likewise, in BC, I don't know if they have any condominiums if they're all stratas.
Do you know the cost of it? Like, does it cost a lot of money to incorporate?
Well, we were incorporated at the beginning as a development company. I mean, that was a company I had as a holding company before that, so there was nothing to that. As far as the condominium is concerned, that was about 75,000, something like that, in legal fees to go through that. And then, of course, the fees, we had surveyors involved in that as well. So it's fairly small, but it's just as complicated for a small one as for a larger one.
So Cynthia, if you check the chat, Loretta just said all the co-housing sites in BC are stratus.
Yeah, I think I've noticed that too with Saskatchewan as well. So
Yeah.
maybe I guess it's provincial. So thank you. I
Okay.
guess I'll let somebody else
All
talk.
right.
Thank you.
Sheila?
A couple of things, a couple of personal things. David, my husband and I just moved into an apartment because in fact we are planning for what's to come. And we're on a one floor. We came out of a townhouse. I'm in Ottawa. I will be 80 this year. And I said to him about 3 months ago, I guess we should start thinking about that. Do I really want to be looking for housing at 85? And he said, good God, no. So that was about 6 months ago. We started looking and we moved in here about 3 weeks ago. It is a NORC. And I'm just learning about what goes on here yet. So I'm hoping to learn more. But on another personal note, Dawn, I know Linda and Rosalind because I actually did get involved with their co-housing project here in Ottawa. Couple of things with regard to that. The reason I'm not any longer is number one, I wasn't in the place where I was buying anything. We decided 10 years ago when we returned to Ottawa, we weren't buying anything anymore. Thanks. We didn't want to fix a roof or an air conditioner or renovate. Good God, we'd already done all that. So we were looking to rent, and that wasn't what they were about. They were about buying. But Rosalind and Linda are solid. Great group of people. So I just wanted you to know that they really are super. The other thing I will say to you is that I am involved, though, with a housing group here in Ottawa that is a consortium, has just started. Well, just started. We started about a year ago, and we're, trying to attract, and we have a number of partners. And in fact, Abbeyfield is one of the folks that is part of this group. But the idea is it's to be called an intergenerational village for seniors, for youth, with affordable housing, and a number of other groups that we want to attract as well. One of the areas of interest to us is leasing land from the federal government, which is, as you would know, challenging. We are having conversations and just did with the city that's, very interested in on board with us. However, my question to you is, have you had any discussions with the government of Canada? Because I'm pretty sure the provincial government doesn't give a damn. But the municipal or the federal government, I guess in this case, because there are lots of opportunities to lease land. It's not easy going through Canada Trust Corporation, which seems to be the keeper of that key. But I'm just interested to know if you've had conversations with them at all.
I haven't myself, but I know that the group, and I think she's probably on this call in Kingston. They had, because of the nature of the city, they had a number of either federal or provincial or national, maybe defense properties that might have been available for them. They had been declared as surplus. So they might, I forget her name right now, but I recognize that she's on the call. So you might call the Kingston Co-housing Group, and they would know about their search for properties at those levels.
Her name is Leslie Donald.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. A good conversation with, yes, exactly.
Okay, we can put it in the chat too. Okay, I'm gonna take one question from the chat and then Donna, and then I think we have to call it a day. So the question from the chat is, what is the ownership or rental arrangement for the units in Watershed? It's from Maria.
So their ownership, they're all owned, well, except we have one for sale now, but they're all owned. One is a rental, and the couple who bought it originally is selling their home now, and they're moving in. So they rented it to a university professor, and that's happening as we speak. They're packing and staging their place for sale, and they'll be moving in, I would expect, midsummer by the time their place sells. So they'll all be sold. And as far as the policy is concerned, we do have a rental policy. We're kind of feeling out our policies as we're going along, and it's one of the learnings that I'd have as well would be to set up your policies on these things, at least a draft of those fairly early, so you don't have to do things under emergencies. So at least you have something, and you can massage it later as you need to, as it fits. So the rental is a little bit different, but of course the tenants in rental aren't the same as being in the decision-making process and involved all the way through. They're basically tenants, and they don't participate very much in terms of tasks and any communal activities that we have. Did that answer your question?
I think so, David. I can't see her anymore. Okay, Donna, I think you've got the last question, and then we're going to just wind this up. Donna?
Great, great. Hi, thanks, Dave. That's been great. As a somewhat of a low-income senior couple, I'm terrified of moving into a condominium for the fees they charge, and I'm wondering, like, how does co-housing compare with that? So that's just one question. The other is, like, what would you consider to be like a minimal investment? Like, if someone wanted to get into helping to establish a co-housing project, what are you looking for from first time people to invest and secure themselves, and also a timeline? Like, so what's a reasonable timeline for one of these projects to, gather enough steam and take all those steps to actually have a place to live?
Yeah, as far as the investment is concerned, I would say you either have to put in the investment in cash of the value of a unit, which is usually market, whatever market is for similar units. And I mean, there aren't necessarily comparables because there are very few co-housing communities. But you could say if it's a one-bedroom apartment, 750 square feet, this is the value, and they'll tell you that. So you either have to do that or find a financing for it. So you have to have the ability to find the finance. That's a challenge. That's a huge challenge. We were paying a lot of money in interest, and it was only because we had to go with private money at a very high rate. And during COVID, it was a nightmare. There were a lot of really touchy games, I guess you could say. But anyway, we persevered with that. And as far as the timing is concerned, the schedule, I would say 2 years is extremely fast because you're looking at probably getting a community going before you acquire property. Advice that you would be doing that because we started actually with the two founders of Co-Housing and Guelph. Basically, well, three of us actually. One was a real estate agent, myself, and the other one's a builder. And the other two people aren't involved anymore, but they kind of put it through that process. So you want to get the people on board first. It's not about finding a piece of property and then people will come. That's kind of the backwards way of doing it. I would really advise you to get together with a group, even if it's 3 or 4 or 6 people at the most, maybe a core group to start things moving forward. And it's not necessarily even the group that would end up owning and being in the community necessarily, but they should be representative of the people who would be moving into it. And the majority of people for sure should be, I think they say at least a third, which should be from the get-go interested in moving in. So it basically starts with the people, and you get that core group, and it grows from there after you have meetings and potlucks and various and decisions are made and that type of thing.
Right. And what about fees, Dave? Like, do you just sort of handle those as they come along?
So yeah, as a condominium corporation, you have to have a minimum. I think it's 10% of your budget as the first year's fee as a reserve fund. So you have to have that, and from there it's really determined by the condominium board monthly fee at. And we're trying. I guess we have a very conservative board in terms of wanting to put a lot of money into the reserve fund now, and they don't have a particularly good reason to that. So we just raised it actually, and I think it's quite high. A lot of people are saying it's kind of really high at 750. But that has to pay for the common space as well. You understand? So it's not just your unit itself. So there's a little bit of an increase in that.
Right.
Part of it is an old building, so there is a good reason to have a reserve fund for that. But the new building is extremely well built, so there won't be anything in that building that's going to require any work. We are putting on photovoltaic array on the roof in the next month or so, so that's going to bring down the living costs. I mean, the living costs, I guess, just generally, the cost of building, for anybody that wants to know, the cost of building is on par with anything comparable, let's say. But the cost of living in every community I've gone to now, the cost of living in community is a lot less in terms of the annual utilities bills. There's so many savings in terms of sharing space and tools and garden equipment and cooking utensils. I mean, there's just so many savings, and with a really efficient unit, our cost for electrical, all the electrical is about $35 a month for each unit sort of thing. That's all their hydro, it's everything's heated.
Amazing. Great.
And it's
Okay,
gonna be
well,
less than that as
Okay.
we get the PV array on board. It's gonna be much less than that.
Nice.
that's great. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Dave.
And thanks for the questions. And we're not going to take more questions to Seniors Action Ontario, and I'll forward them on to David. David, thank you so much. We promised an
Very well.
info-packed session, and you certainly delivered that, and we're very appreciative. This was inspiring to a lot of people, so I think hopefully we'll start to see a lot more co-housing projects getting going on in Ontario. I just want to say the recording and slides will be available within the next couple of days. So everybody who registered will get the link to the recording and we'll get the slides as well. So David, thank you again very much. And this has been extremely helpful for everyone.